Yet another former LSU Tiger is dominating the conversation in their respective sport at the highest level of the sport.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. That also includes YouTube, so you can check us out on your preferred podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, wherever you listen, you can find us there. You can also watch the podcast as well. So subscribe on YouTube, like, rate, review, comment, all that great stuff. Just always appreciate you for making us your first listen every single day. Today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. So that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So it seems like every couple of months, maybe even at this point, every few weeks, there's yet another LSU Tiger or former LSU Tiger excelling and dominating the conversation at the highest level of the sport. We were just talking about Angel Reese and the WNBA draft. How many times do we talk about Joe Burrow dominating so much of the conversation at the NFL level? Well, now it was Paul Skenes' turn because former LSU Tiger and national champion Paul Skenes made his Major League Baseball debut on Saturday. A little bit later than anticipated, a 2.5 hour rain delay pushed his start to later than anticipated, but Paul Skenes got called up to the bigs. Paul Skenes, welcome to the show. He made his Major League Baseball debut with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, I want to get into what that means for LSU, what this means for LSU baseball and Jay Johnson. But first, a little bit of a recap of the day from Paul Skenes' debut. If you weren't able to tune in Saturday, Pirates playing the Chicago Cubs, and like I mentioned, there was like 2.5 hour rain delay, absolutely brutal. Paul Skenes went just over 4 innings, struck out 7, gave up 6 hits, gave up 3 earned runs, one of those being a home run. Threw 84 pitches. So that's right around a sweet spot that you're going to want from your starting pitcher. Now, ideally, that gets you further than 4 1/3, 4 2/3, I believe. Ideally, that gets you further. So it wasn't a perfect Major League Baseball debut. It wasn't a Steven Strasburg kind of debut where he struck out 14 and walked none of them. It wasn't necessarily that. Definitely saw some flaws in Paul Skenes' game. Even the manager in Pittsburgh said, look, I think that just the stage and the anticipation and the nerves probably threw his command off a little bit because Paul Skenes' fastball was a little bit more crazy, a little bit wilder than maybe you are, at least we are. And of course, what Pirates fans expect to get from Paul Skenes. But I think you can attribute that to the nerves and the anxiety, and you seen that command. Obviously, you saw it at LSU, and you also saw it in the minors as well. So not a perfect day from Paul Skenes, but I think that you saw what he's going to eventually become at the major league level. 17 of his 84 pitches were 100 miles an hour or better. In fact, one of those 17 pitches that were in the triple digits was 101.9, which is the fastest recorded pitch from a Pittsburgh Pirate ever since they started tracking that statistic in 2008. So just think about that. And Paul Skenes' very first debut at the highest level, he's doing something that had never been done before, or at least nothing that had ever been tracked before, and it's been nearly 20 years. So if you're a Pittsburgh Pirate fan, which I am not, granted, but I think that you can look at what Paul Skenes did and say, this kid is freaking special. Even if it wasn't his absolute A game, absolute best stuff on Saturday, because like I said, 7 strikeouts, 6 hits, 3 runs, gave up a dinger. Of course, you want more than that. Of course, there's a better game that you can play, but for your very first debut, I mean, I'll take that. And I think Pirates fans can take that as well. But overall, it's really just what he showed. Overall, it's really just the everything that we have been sold on what this guy can be has shown us that he absolutely has what it takes to get there. Um, so overall, great day for Paul Skenes, but beyond just what he actually did on the mound, I think about the hype. I think about how much buzz this guy got when he got called up. It was the social media frenzy. It was the fact that tickets for that game, at least trying to find tickets for that game, was nearly impossible. That the ticket prices went through the roof. That Pirates fans were swarming around the ballpark trying to get in and trying to get into the stadium and trying to get into the stadium early to see Paul Skenes walk out to the mound for the first time, to make sure that they didn't miss a single pitch, a single second of what the Paul Skenes, I guess we can call it the Paul Skenes era would be. So much hype for Paul Skenes' debut. In fact, Tim Kirchin, who is, longtime ESPN baseball reporter and insider. Like Tim Kirchin has been around the game for forever. If anybody knows anything about Major League Baseball, Tim Kirchin is your guy. I mentioned Steven Strasburg earlier. Tim Kirchin said, I think the best debut I've ever seen was Steven Strasburg. He struck out 14, like I mentioned, walked 0. No one had ever done that in their Major League debut. I think that Paul Skenes' debut will be the most anticipated non-Yamamoto or Ohtani debut since Steven Strasburg. And that's exactly what it seemed like it was. Now, I wasn't there, so I cannot say, definitively, how crazy it was or what all the buzz was, but we saw it on social media. We saw all of the hype to make sure that all eyes were on Paul Skenes' debut. And if I'm Jay Johnson, from the LSU perspective of that is the greatest recruiting tool in Jay Johnson's arsenal. It's not just the ring. It's not just the sheer number of years on the intimidator in right field of, look, you can win championships at LSU because that is a proven product. Even in the Jay Johnson era, because it's one thing to say, that any former coaches that Skip Bertman won World Series, and it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do? What about this coach right here? What about right now? Well, Jay Johnson has already shown, look, yeah, you can win a championship with me as your head coach. Then not only at LSU can you win championships, but also at LSU, you're not only going to be developed into into a major league player, not only going to find yourself into the big leagues, but you also can get to the point where Paul Skenes is at, or maybe where Dylan Cruz is at in Washington, where there is so much excitement, encouragement, and just overall hype surrounding these guys. That's Jay Johnson's pitch. It's not just, look, you get to play in front of nearly 20,000 fans on any given night. It's not just, hey, we're going to maximize your NIL opportunities. It's not just, hey, you're going to win a whole hell of a lot of baseball games and contend for championships here. Obviously, that feels a little bit different to say now that we're talking about an LSU baseball team that might miss out on the postseason, but bear with me here. But if I'm Jay Johnson, I'm using a guy like Paul Skenes or like Dylan Cruz, like I mentioned. The guys that just did it, that were just here. Because of course you can look at the Nolas and the Bregmans of this LSU program, how they, how much they accomplished in their time at LSU and how much they've really grown to that next level. But it's different when it literally just happened this past year. That you are not that far removed, really not far removed at all from the Skenes and Cruz era. So what an incredible recruiting tool in Jay Johnson's back pocket. And I'll reiterate the same sentiment that I'll say about Brian Kelly is, look, it's not your job to get players to the next level. It's not your job to develop starters in Major League Baseball or starters in the National Football League. Your job is to win games. So I know that we're talking about a completely different conversation when it comes to LSU baseball this season, when it comes to what LSU needs to do against Ole Miss next weekend in order to get into the postseason. I understand that that's a completely different conversation. But to say, for any 15, 16-year-old kid that walks into Jay Johnson's office on a recruiting visit, to say, look, at these two guys that are not that much older than you, that were just here last season, you can do what they did. You can become what they've become. Because Paul Skenes has become an absolute celebrity in Major League Baseball. And he's only been there for a day. All right, I do want to continue the conversation because I want to get the Pittsburgh Pirates perspective of this. Truly, what the excitement is amongst Pirates fans. So we will get that with Ethan Smith, the host of Locked On Pirates, coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you guys about LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. So when I was looking for, helping the radio station that I work for find a new producer, we were strapped for time, we were strapped for cash. We just wanted to find the right person that could fill in a role at an incredibly busy time. So we went to LinkedIn Jobs. And the reason why we did that is because LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. And even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but they could be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, then you're looking in the wrong place. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, so you can be one of them as well. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Folks, it is Paul Skenes' debut day. It is Saturday. It's a magical day. We've been waiting for this day for what seems like years, and it's only been less than a year already at this point. Paul Skenes, of course, being drafted last season in the MLB draft by the Pittsburgh Pirates, #1 overall. And who better to bring back on the show to bring some more perspective on Paul Skenes' debut day than Caroline Fenton of Locked On LSU, who had the pleasure of covering Paul Skenes and, of course, the general scope of LSU athletics here at Locked On. Caroline, how are you today?
I'm fired up. I'm excited. I mean, as soon as I saw the very cinematic and dramatic and very well done video put out by the Pittsburgh Pirates announcing that Paul Skenes was going to be called up, the first thing I did was pull out my phone and map how far the drive to Pittsburgh is because I wanted to get in the car and drive to Pittsburgh and be there for Paul Skenes' debut, which is saying a lot from me as a Cardinals fan. That I've never been dying to get to a Pittsburgh Pirates game. But that's just the Paul Skenes effect. And that's the effect that he's had on LSU and LSU fans is everyone is so excited to see what he does in the next level because he was so excellent at the college level.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, and that's why I've been getting different perspectives from everybody else. I can only talk about Paul Skenes so much to where I'm just going to sound like a beaten drum and saying that the guy's going to be generational. He's a Pittsburgh Pirate. He's just amping up a rotation that's already had success to start this season and already has some pretty big shoes to fill with Jared Jones, who's had quite the start as well. But I kind of want to go back because I don't think we have Locked On Air Force, so I can't go that far back. But I figure we can go back to his time of when he was solely a pitcher at LSU, and I watched quite a bit of college baseball. And just seeing what he was doing at that level, you were kind of getting the idea, Caroline, that he was going to be a generational guy. He was going to be this kind of person that was just going to have this magnitude, this aura, this energy around him that is going to create what we're going to see later today, where in all likelihood, PNC Park will be sold out. You're going to be seeing these people kind of have a playoff atmosphere centered around one guy. So where did you think that this all started for Paul Skenes, where he finally kind of got on that track to eventually being the 1-1 for the Pirates last year?
You say generational, and I think it's very fair and justified to call Paul Skenes a generational talent. And frankly, I do think in sports media, it's a word that's overused. We just finished up NFL draft time, called Caleb Williams a generational quarterback. And I'm like, well, didn't we call the quarterbacks last year generational? Like, if we're calling them every single year generational, then they're not truly generational. But what Paul Skenes did at LSU, now what he ends up being in Major League Baseball is to be determined, and we'll see. What he did at LSU truly was so special that it was generational. I mean, he broke an all-time strikeout record that had been standing for 20 or 30 years since Ben McDonald was at LSU. So it truly was generational. And I think the pivot happened when he transferred. You mentioned Air Force. When he transferred from Air Force to LSU, he talked about that, a few weeks into the season, or maybe even a few months into the season. He talked about, well, when I got to LSU, I got to just focus on pitching. At Air Force, he caught, he hit, and he pitched, and of course, all of the other responsibilities and duties that come with going to a service academy. He comes to LSU, he could go to class and he could pitch and he could lift and he could eat. And that was about it. He could focus all of his energy on being a pitcher, and you really saw him be able to hone in on his craft. And of course, he was an excellent pitcher at Air Force. And he was on preseason All-American Awards watch lists at Air Force because of what he could do on the mound. But he was able to really fine-tune that at LSU. And just for Pirates fans that are listening that didn't follow Paul Skenes at LSU, it was an automatic dub. As an LSU fan, on Friday nights when Paul Skenes was on the mound, I didn't care who we were playing. I didn't care what pitcher LSU was facing. It was an automatic win. Even when LSU played Tennessee and Chase Dolander, another one of the top prospects in that 2023 class, beat him against Rhett Lauder, another one of the top pitchers in that class at Wake Forest. You just felt this overwhelming sense of confidence of, if nobody got us, Paul Skenes got us.
Yeah, and I think that that's a sentiment already that Pirates fans kind of feel. You look at what he's done in the minor leagues already, has a sub-2 ERA in the minor leagues, a sub-1 ERA this year in those 7 quote-unquote starts that I like to call them, where he was going about 3 or 4 innings.
Yeah.
And that's what I also want to tail back to as well, is a lot of people will say, yeah, you can throw that word generational around. You can look around at what he did at LSU, what he's already done in the minor leagues. But from your perspective of having watched him pretty much from the beginning of this journey that he's been on, how good is he? I mean, you're talking about already saying anytime he was on the mound at LSU, he was a guy that we're going to win this game. Mm-hmm. Now, in MLB, little bit different atmosphere. You're not always going to guarantee that. The win and loss metric has kind of been shoved to the side now in terms of pitcher metrics.
Right.
But on like today, for instance, should Pirates fans feel that way with Skenes on the mound against the Chicago Cubs in his debut, just because he has that kind of aura and energy around him?
I don't know if I could venture to say that that's going to be the same feeling at the major league level. Of course, there's so many other factors involved, but I will say why I felt so confident and why LSU fans felt so confident whenever Paul Skenes was on the mound. It's several different reasons, and it's rare combinations that he wasn't just good at, like he was elite at. It's the speed, the fastball. I mean, that's what's really going to earn Paul Skenes his paycheck in the major leagues, is the fastball. And it's not just the speed. He can be a consistent 100, 101, 102 mile an hour fastball. It's the command of it as well. Because I think a lot of guys, once they get up to that speed, if you can find the strike zone, great. But it's no guarantee that it's going to be right down the middle. But it's the command and the speed. And it's not just the command and the speed for a couple of innings. It's the consistency, and it's also the endurance. That you can see Paul Skenes get up to triple digits of pitches thrown and still be consistently throwing 98, 99, 100 miles an hour. And I think we saw it. I'll look at, to kind of put Pirates fans at ease, I'll look at the biggest games that he pitched at LSU. I'll look at Game 2 against Wake Forest in the College World Series semifinals before the finals against Florida. Paul Skenes pitched in Game 2, and that was ultimately the game that pushed LSU over the edge to get to the College World Series. He threw 8 innings, 120 pitches, and 82 of those were strikes. And that is on a gotta have it day, gotta have it game, biggest stage of the season up until that point. So he's going not entirely the distance, but 8 innings. I mean, that's about as much as you could ask for from a starter, 120 pitches, and consistently throwing strikes on a really big stage. So I think a lot of, fans might ask themselves, well, you threw really well in college. How is that going to translate to the big leagues? I can't answer that question, but I can tell you that there was no stage that seemed to be too big for Paul Skenes. He's a California kid, and he kind of has that same kind of
Yeah.
demeanor, very laid back, very casual, very cavalier, never gets too high, never gets too low. But still, again, with that being said, he has the work ethic like crazy. Like his routine, his regiment is really astonishing and really probably beyond his years. But that's kind of where the Air Force element comes from. He comes from a military family, from a very regimented family. So it's almost like the same very rare combination that he has of speed and command, and now all the reports that I'm seeing, the evolution of the tools that he has and the number of pitches he can throw. I think his demeanor is also a very rare
Mhm.
combination of regimented and rigid, but also super laid back and calm, cool, and collected. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and even more. So if you're looking to play some money on the NBA playoffs, which has been an absolute blast over the past couple of weeks, just check out some Anthony Edwards player props. I mean, the things that he's been doing, the way that he's been able to carry the Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, it's getting chippy. It's getting heated. It is getting to the point when your stars, your best players need to step up. So that's exactly what I expect from Anthony Edwards. So take a look at a couple of prop bets, but hey, that's my take. Do it how you want to do it. Just do it with FanDuel. Visit fanduel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. Remember, $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, and player props, and so much more for new customers that win any winning $5 bet. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
The atmosphere he's going to see today is going to be a playoff like atmosphere at PNC Park in a Saturday game in May. It's going to be a 4:05 start, but I can guarantee you going to this game that I know it's going to be almost like 2013 all over again against the Cincinnati Reds for one guy.
Yeah.
And you're saying that he can handle any situation, any atmosphere like that. So what else do you think that he learned in college that could translate to the major league level that will work in his favor?
And yeah, to kind of piggyback off of that initial point there, it wasn't just in the postseason. It wasn't just in
Mhm.
the College World Series. It wasn't just in Omaha. It wasn't just in Super Regionals. At LSU, like baseball is a serious deal. Like
Yeah.
baseball is the spring religion, football's the fall religion.
Mhm.
That LSU on any given night will pack out Alec Buck Stadium with upwards of 20,000 fans. And any given series, there were going to be several MLB scouts in the stands. Those are really high stakes. And Paul Skenes very early on kind of became the savior, kind of became the must see guy for LSU fans. He knew that, he understood that, and still
Mhm.
was able to have this kind of consistency. I would say another thing that he was able to learn at LSU, more, technically, more pitching forward. There's pitching coach Wes Johnson, who's now the head coach at Georgia, who's one of the most well-respected pitching coaches in baseball, not just college
Mhm.
baseball, not just at the Major League Baseball, but as a whole. And I think that what Wes Johnson was able to work with Paul Skenes is really kind of fine tuning, not just the fastball, which I said is going to make him millions of dollars in his
That
day,
is.
but it was also kind of evolving the rest of his tools as well. It was the slider and the fastball that was really his bread and butter at LSU. You saw very few changeups. You didn't see him really kind of stray away from what his bread and butter was, mostly because he didn't have to, because it
Yeah, he
worked.
didn't have to.
But what I think that Wes Johnson did a really good job of was setting the foundation of, you don't have to, because you're going to be able to juke out college hitters if you throw a 102-mile-an-hour fastball their way. But he kind of started that framework and that foundation of developing him as a major league pitcher. And I think coming from LSU, there's a long history of not just great major league pitchers, but major league players as a whole. It's a place to be
Yeah.
developed for the next level.
Well, and you remember last year as well, before we wrap up, that Dylan Cruz, we were
Yeah.
having that conversation, is which LSU guy do the Pirates take? Do they take the quote unquote generational outfielder in Dylan Cruz? Obviously, you see Wyatt Langford doing great things in Texas right now.
Mhm.
Or do you take Paul Skenes? They ultimately go with Skenes. And what's one more thing that you could say to the Pirates, overarching Pirates fans, the organization, everything about Skenes, as to what we can expect from this kid now and what we can expect from him in the future as well.
One thing that I'll say kind of more a little bit more holistically off the field, I'll see all of these videos of him staying after games for hours. Hours, long lines of fans lining up to meet
Mhm.
him, to shake his hand, to get his autograph. And he does it. And he stays after with bells on. And he will wait until every single person that's been waiting late at night in the heat or in the cold or in the rain has been able to see him or get his autograph. I think that's special for a kid with his kind of notoriety, with his kind of now newfound fame over the past couple of years, the amount of money that he's making, it could be really easy for him to say, look, I just went out, I pitched 3, 4, 5, 6 innings. I'm exhausted. I got another game tomorrow. We're hitting the road. Like, hey, if everyone could
Mhm.
understand, I don't think that anyone would really fault him for that. But I think it's a true testament to his character that that is something that he absolutely enjoys and will wholeheartedly enjoy and accept. I think too, what should make Pirates fans very excited, as I mentioned in college, his bread and butter was the slider and it was the fastball. Well, that's a really good, foundation for growth. And I just think that we're scratching the surface of what Paul Skenes can be. That if the fastball is as good as it is, if the slider was as good as what we saw at LSU, I've seen a ton of reports where he's working on the sinker, he's working on the curveball. Well, if you can add those pitches into his
Yeah.
arsenal and they can be as fine tuned as what his good stuff has been over the past couple of years, I mean, like, I think that we're looking at an absolute star in the making, and he already is an absolute star.
Yeah, and I think for Pirates fans too, I mean, we haven't seen a pitcher of this gravity come up since Garrett Cole. And I
Yeah.
think today is going to be very special. Thank you for coming on and sharing a different perspective of this. Obviously, you just taught us a lot about a lot of things that I personally didn't know. Yeah, I watch college baseball, but I've never been to Louisiana. I don't know what's going on at LSU every single day. Caroline Fenton, thank you so much, folks. Make sure you check out Locked On LSU here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And of course, check out Locked On Pirates, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, and of course, your LSU Tigers every single day.
All right, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And a special shout out and thank you to Ethan Smith of the Locked On Pirates podcast for stopping by, allowing me to talk about Paul Skenes, because trust me, anytime I get an opportunity to talk about a guy like Paul Skenes, I'm going to take it. So appreciate Ethan Smith for giving us kind of the Pittsburgh Pirates perspective of what bringing up Paul Skenes really means at that next level. Now, coming up next, there are some national championship odds out there from our friends over at the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Why I wouldn't take a certain LSU bet. We'll get into that on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.